All right, so coming up, we hear expectations on Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's budget speech. Public service unions affiliated to COSATU and SAFTU join us to highlight the intention of going on strike, on an indefinite strike, in fact. And South Africa will commemorate Armed Forces Day on the 21st of February. We speak to military expert Helmut Roma-Heitman. Right, hello and welcome live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Thank you for tuning into the week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson. Throughout the show, throughout the week, interact with us on our various social media platforms using the hashtag The Week Ahead or at The Week Ahead. So with that said and done, let's take a look at what we can expect for today. We'll be focusing on all things related to the budget speech that is set to take place on the 22nd of February. The increasing rate of immigration continues to threaten the country's tax revenue. And tax collection is likely to decline as some South Africans choose to cease tax residency in South Africa and rather withdraw their pension funds and investments. The high unemployment rate as well as marginally low salaries are also having a negative impact on revenue collection.
About 6,000 South Africans emigrated from the country last year in search for better job prospects in other countries, and some are highly skilled individuals who contribute immensely to the country's tax revenue. The country's slow economic growth as well as electricity shortages are believed to be some of the reasons pushing residents to emigrate, and a proposed wealth tax is expected to also drive people out of the country as they try to avoid a high tax burden. Only about 16 million people are registered for income tax in South Africa, and analysts believe that this number is likely to dwindle if more taxpayers leave the country.
There are early indications that immigration is beginning to negatively impact South Africa's public finances. The nominal number of individuals leaving South Africa and deregistering for tax is still nominally small, and the total tax foregone, similarly, is not very substantial. However, when one considers, for instance, that a little bit more than 300,000 South Africans account for approximately 42% of total income tax, every 1,000 or 10,000 individuals that leave South Africa, that financially emigrate, will over time certainly crimp South Africa's public finances. And of course, there's also an intertemporal dynamic to the extent that families that emigrate also imply that future income earners, in other words, contemporary youth that become future income earners, are also lost, displaced from South Africa's tax base. So South Africa enjoys a progressive tax system. In other words, because of inequality, higher income individuals tend to pay more tax than lower income individuals. An entirely judicious concept, but also innate to that idea is the idea of vulnerability, to the extent that South Africa relies on an incredibly small proportion of South African taxpayers to be able to fund the bulk of taxes. In other words, South Africa's tax system can be argued to rest on a pinhead, and a pinhead that is already decaying because of immigration.
The newly implemented expert tax law for 2022 and 2023 dictates that from March 2022, the first 1.25 million earned in a foreign income is exempt from tax in South Africa. And some immigrants have opted to cease tax residency in South Africa to avoid any further tax obligations here, even if they're required to pay an exit levy. Ndombela says this is likely to deal a heavy blow on the country's tax base.
When they cease tax residency, yes, they will pay that exit levy when they exit. But then what happens is that if they withdraw their pensions at some point, then South Africa might not have a taxing right on that pension payout because now they are resident somewhere else. And then there's also a case where if they've got South African investment income, South Africa might not tax them on that investment income because in terms of the double tax treaty, that's taxable in whichever country that they're working on.
Analysts are hopeful that Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana will not implement any income tax increases when he tables his budget on the 22nd of February, as this could further burden taxpayers and exacerbate the rate of immigration. Naledi Matlapeng, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, staying with budget news, South Africa's workforce has experienced difficult times due to an economy that has failed to grow. Workers will be looking to the finance minister for a budget that will bring relief to public servants. This comes as the wage dispute between government and labour organisations COSATU, SAFTU and SAPU carries over into the new year. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana is expected to deliver the 2023-2024 budget in Cape Town this coming Wednesday.
Public service unions have vowed to reject a 2023-2024 budget that doesn't make provision for workers' wage demands. Workers will on budget day embark on demonstrations in Cape Town and Pretoria, where they'll officially serve the employer with a 7-day notice to go on a full-blown strike. These workers say they've faced many challenges and the 2023-2024 budget must attend to their hardship.
The minister must at least give more money in the police so that we don't have the situation that we are seeing now. It is in our interest to make sure that members of the police are being taken care of. There is a 400 rands that is being given for members of the police that is called the danger allowance. How on earth have you seen members who work so in a country where crime is so high like this, members of police get 400 rands as a danger allowance?
Our members are ready to embark on a massive campaigns. 22nd during the budget speech, and they are clear in terms of the mandate to say from the 22nd of February we need to serve the employer with a 7 days notice so that we embark on a full-blown strike.
The Minister of Finance must stop cutting the budget of health. And we are saying what will please us is if we have a capable public service delivered to the public, and in particular rural areas where you have a difficulty.
The Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU, has affiliates that represent around 800,000 workers in the public sector. The federation says Treasury needs to present a budget that will mend strained relations between government and workers.
The employer is saying, but we are unable to give you what you want because of the fiscal challenges. But what we understand is that it is not just that there is no budget necessarily, but the money in this country is going off through corruption. And we're saying, fix the state, fix corruption in this country, deal with it decisively, and you will have enough to be able to pay those that wake up in the morning to come and give service to the people of this country.
Economists say a capable and effective state will come about through government meeting the demands of workers in such a way that productivity and the delivery of services are not hampered.
If civil servants are unhappy with a wage increase, which is about half of headline inflation, it means that that's going to knock onto productivity. Unlike other work streams, government can't exactly fire a huge sector of an unhappy civil service, because that means that the already strained public service will be rendered completely ineffectual. There must be ways in which the demands of workers can be met, whether it's structured over a couple of years, whether there are other aspects of the remuneration package can be looked at. But as citizens of this country, we cannot have the workforce of the public service unhappy and downing tools.
The public servants say their confidence in government is dwindling. They'll be outside Parliament and the Treasury in Pretoria on budget day, taking issue with an austerity budget overtime that have left workers compromised. The workers are preparing for a full-blown strike action, and this in 7 days' time from budget day over wages. They are hopeful that the Finance Minister will come through with well-needed relief. Katlego Lohodi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, so for more on this, we're joined by Chief Economist at Pan-African Investment and Research Service, Dr. Iraj Abedian. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Iraj. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Thank you very much, and greetings to our viewers.
So we've got another important week coming up for the country, and perhaps we're going to see the ripple effects thereof once the Finance Minister, of course, delivers his budget speech on Wednesday. I think I just want to start off by looking at the expectations and even the risks that the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, is set to face and address in 2023 for the next financial year.
Yeah, I think that it's a budget with all budgets are full of expectations from different groups within the society. It's no dramatic statement to say that this particular budget, 2023, is under massive expectation on at least 4 segments of the society. The society at large, everybody in business, household, poor, rich, working, etc., expects the minister to finally come up with a solution for the so-called Eskom debt, 400 and rising every day billion balance sheet debt. The minister has before promised that in this budget, and the president also confirmed, is going to find a solution, take some of that debt off the balance sheet. We don't know, but hopefully the much promised and nothing done about it this time around will be clarified. The capital market is expecting that with some level of anxiety. Related to that is President's promise, which is, if it happens, is a very good start of government subsidizing the rollout of citizens, businesses, as well as households going off the grid and reducing the pressure on Eskom and diversifying the sources of national energy. That subsidy scheme is another massive expectations, potentially a game changer for the economy. So call it the energy complex is one of the key areas that everybody expects. On the labor side, as your previous input showed, the unions are obviously up in arms. They are facing massive price increases, particularly food and transportation, and the proposed wage increase is not going to cut it. So that's another expectation. Equally, there has been and remains a great pressure for government to introduce some or other form of basic income tax. That is another key expectations. And as they say proverbially, government has been, and the president for 4 years has been kicking the can down the road. At some point, that road has to end. And instead of kicking the can, we need to fix it and say yes or no. And that's another area. And the final area, which is very important, the economy is on the decline. The economic growth has been on the decline. And that means a few things. Government taxes are not going to be as high as they budgeted. And the Commissioner of SARS is already on record to say that he's going not to deliver on unexpected tax revenues, which means government borrowing is going up, interest rates are high. So the entire section on public debt, GDP growth is under pressure, and we need to have a solution. And at the heart of it, Liesl, lies the fact that the government does not and has not and does not seem to have a credible plan to invest in the required infrastructure, not just energy, but also rail, ports, and so on and so forth, and create the enabling environment for the private sector to invest. So that's the final, possibly the most important segment of what the budget is expected to deliver on.
Let's get into some of those issues that you've just touched on. Given the precarious economic situation South Africa's in, the high cost of living, you've alluded to the energy crisis, the stifling economic growth that the country is also undergoing. I think my question is, how does future government taxes then compare to the expected GDP for this 2023-2024 budget?
Look, the fact is that government has been living beyond its means. By that, I mean, is spending too much, okay, for a couple of years because of COVID, they justified it. But quite frankly, if we take COVID out of the picture, government is living at large. Cabinet is way too large. The focus of government is more spend more, bring more people into the presidency, bring more people into the cabinet, as if expanding the overhead of government is going to fix the government. Government needs to be populated by competent people so that the economy can grow, so that the tax revenue can rise, not to fall. And I think that's a big issue for the president and for the cabinet. And the president has promised a lot for the past 5 years, but hasn't really delivered on it. And every time that he wants to deliver, he brings another person into his office at a huge cost. For example, in his latest State of the Nation, he promises a minister of electricity. Well, that's about 40 million rand on top of all the existing costs of the cabinet. This economy is way too poor, and there are too many poor people in South Africa who can afford another 40 million rand throw a minister. Some of these ministers are actually not worth a penny, never mind 40 million. So I think what the tax issue shows is government not fixing the revenue side and keep borrowing and does not have the right mix of capabilities, right mix of policies to turn the economy around. And that's what the president has to do. And I think the Minister of Finance is at the center of making some pronouncement on those policies.
We obviously are not just concentrated on South Africa. Perhaps as we look at the microeconomic issues, we have to look at it in the global context, given the macroeconomics and what's transpiring the world over. And so with this much anticipated 2023 budget speech, I mean, it comes at a time, as we spoke about, how South Africa is battling economic uncertainty. And so in lieu of all these factors, can South Africa's economy survive a lurking global recession? What factors are also going to be needed to be factored in to mitigate against that that's set to also impact us?
Absolutely. The global economy is really thrown into massive uncertainties, geopolitical uncertainties post-COVID. We were just coming out of the COVID pandemic, and then the Ukrainian invasion by the Russians has caused massive realignment of geopolitical risk, and who knows, another 5, 6, 7 years of this uncertainty before the Ukrainian-Russian situation settles down. In the meantime, we face uncertainty on the energy front, on the cost of food production. Remember, energy, fuel means fertilizer, means transportation, means shipping, means international trade, all of which affects a wide variety of sectors, especially food security. And for South Africa, that's an important one, because fresh fruit export and broadly agriculture export, including maize and so on, is an important part of our export and revenue stream, and hence economic growth. So our economic growth at the moment is vulnerable to the uncertainties that surround the global economy, and all of those uncertainties are unfortunately geopolitical. And South Africa has got a balancing act to do between the Russian, Chinese on the one hand, American, Europeans on the other hand. All of that is not good for the stability and predictability that we need to grow our economy.
Dr. Iraj, in the interest of time, I mean, there's so many other themes and inputs that want us to look at ahead of Wednesday and beyond. But in conclusion, I just wanted to look at wealth tax. And, you know, we heard the commissioner from SARS, Edward Kisweta, saying that raising the taxes or creating a new wealth tax is not necessarily going to fill the gap in terms of the budget. So in lieu of this, I wonder what progress SARS is making on corruption, but also increasing the pressure on perhaps the untaxed wealth. How would you weigh in on that in conclusion?
Yeah, I think that the wealth tax is going to be another sort of noise in the system. It's not going to deliver revenue. It's going to chase away skilled labor. It's going to discourage the incoming of either South Africa or non-South African skilled people. And that's not a good thing at the moment. We need to make South Africa a great deal more attractive, reliable, from a long-term wealth generation point of view before we can talk about tax on wealth. What we need to do in the short term is to make the government a lot more efficient, cut the fat out, make the cabinet half the size that it is, get the incompetent ministers, incompetent DGs out of the way. Corruption cannot talk about corruption. We need to deliver on corruption, meaning fighting corruption. We need to deliver on these stolen billions, hundreds of billions that in the short term the government could recover if they go about it the right way. So we need, in brief, Lizo, the government has to stop talking and they must deliver. And if they don't know how to deliver, then they must bring the people and the competencies that they need around the table in order to start delivering to the nation, the poor and the business sector at the same time.
Dr. Iraj, thank you for your time here on the SABC. Dr. Iraj Abedian is the Chief Economist at Pan-African Investment and Research Service, really giving us a budget preview ahead of the Finance Minister Ido Godongwana's budget speech that's set to be delivered on Wednesday, the 22nd of February of 2023. Let's take a quick ad break. We continue with more news upon our return. We'll be right back. All right, so a big focus for this coming week is going to reflect and really look at what the expectations and also the risks are in relation to the budget speech that is set to be delivered by the Finance Minister Ido Godongwana on the 22nd of February 2023. Earlier on, we spoke to Dr. Iraj Abedian, Chief Economist, really weighing in on some of the issues that many will be looking to see him address. We're also looking at the segments that he will be focusing on. Looks like Eskom debts will be a big talker. We've got the energy complex and perhaps how the energy crisis is going to also be dealt with. We've got the labor side. The unions are up in arms. We're also seeing the ripple effects of, how this is going to impact food and transport. There's also pressures on the basic income tax, and also really battling against the backdrop of a stagnant economy that obviously is in decline. So we spoke to him. He echoed some of the sentiments and expectations ahead of that preview, with the preview. And we're obviously also going to get a reaction from the unions. We see that on Wednesday, in fact, the 22nd of February, public service unions affiliated to both COSATU and SAFTU will embark on demonstrations to highlight their intention of going on an indefinite strike. The unions say that government has refused to improve on its 3% wage offer, despite numerous demonstrations held against the offer, which happened last year. So for more, joining us for discussion is December Mavuso, General Secretary for NEHAO. A very good afternoon to you, December. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Good afternoon. Let me correct you firstly that I'm the Deputy General Secretary, not the General Secretary.
All right. Thank you for that. Context is important. We will definitely get that right. But obviously, on a serious note, this week, perhaps even beyond that, we're going to see what is set to transpire from the budget speech and that balancing act that the Finance Minister is going to have to employ. We also understand that in 2 days' time, you're set to embark on a strike. And I wonder if you could speak to whether it is all systems go with the demonstrations by the members of the unions.
No, thank you very much. You will remember that we started with these demonstrations last year after negotiations failed and we've declared a dispute, which dispute was conciliated and we parties could not find each other. We marched in Pretoria, handed over a memorandum. We marched in Cape Town on the 9th of December, handed over a memorandum of demands, which were responded by the employer. And clearly in their response, they indicated that they are not prepared to settle this dispute. So this year we're coming back. Workers have given us a mandate to proceed with a strike action. But as a build-up for the strike action, we're going to be holding demonstrations outside the hall in Parliament where the Minister will be delivering the speech. We'll be holding the same demonstration in Pretoria outside National Treasury. So we are ready. Members have been mobilized. All the arrangement and logistics have been put in place. We're going to be in Cape Town. We're going to be in Pretoria on the 22nd. Immediately after that, the demonstrations, we will be serving the strike notice, which in terms of the law, it will run for 7 days before it becomes effective.
All right, December, thank you for that context. I actually want to bring in Solly Malema, General Secretary of NUPSWA, into this conversation. Solly, if you can hear me, good afternoon. Thank you for also being part of this. December just really highlighted, what is set to transpire within the next 2 days. And my question to you is, how much impact do you think the demonstrations on Wednesday are going to have on the employer at large? And do you think that the 7% that you are fighting for, in fact, will be granted?
Yeah, thanks and greetings to your viewership and DGS. Well, in terms of the mandate that we were given by our members last year, remember we have balloted. So based on that, we will make a huge impact. And in terms of whether the 7% or whether the 7% will be granted, we will intensify the strike up until the employers succumb to pressure and give our members that remaining 7%. Remember, our demand was 10%, and the employer unilaterally so implemented the 3%. And we need to be clear to say we're not only fighting for an increase, but we are fighting for the attack on the collective bargaining. So that message needs to be clear, that it's not only about the increase, we're also fighting for the attack against the collective bargaining. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Solly. In fact, I wanted to also look at, how government last year did not meet your demands of increasing from the 3% that they were offering. And I wonder, whether you think this time around, as unions, you actually stand a chance to be heard and that your demands will be met?
Yes, and we remember majority of our members gave us a mandate to embark on a strike.
Yes.
If the employer is not offering the 10% that they have demanded. And based on that, we are sure that they will make an impact. And we are quite sure that we are going to make an impact in the upcoming strike should the employer not present an offer as per the mandate. And then secondly, what we worried about and the issue of attack on collective bargaining. We are well aware that the minister will present the austerity budget on the 22nd. And we don't understand why should the government or the employer present the budget for increases before we can even discuss or negotiate in the bargaining council. So in our view, the employer is negotiating in bad faith, because how do you budget before the negotiations can even start? So that is our concern as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Solly. December, let me bring you back into the conversation just on the back of, what Solly echoed about an attack on collective bargaining. Government implemented the 3% last year for the financial year of 2022-2023. So in lieu of what Solly's just highlighted, do you think that there's still a chance to have this percentage increased? If so, why? I'm only asking because there's obviously going to be ripple effects. Are there possibilities of public servants being fired? What is also going to be the impact of service delivery should you embark on the strike then, if demands are not met?
No, thank you very much. No, we believe our demands are reasonable and they can be met. Remember that government in 2020 opportunistically used the environment created by COVID not to honor the last leg of Resolution 1 of 2018. So they did not pay workers their salaries. And out of that, actually, they have realized a savings of about 13 billion, which money we want. It belongs to these public servants. In 2021, they also took money that belongs to these public servants, which came as a result of the pay progression agreement, and pretended that they are giving workers a salary increase of 1.5%. On top of that, they gave them the gratuity of 1,000 rand. So they throughout these measures they've been putting in place, they've been saving money. But in addition to that, I must say, this is not just about collective bargaining, by the way. It's also about defending the public service. Government have not been filling vacant posts for many years now. The latest information in terms of the headcount in the public service in the TPSA indicates that there are about 165,000 vacant positions. Where did that money go? So since 2015, they've been freezing positions as and when people are resigning in the public service, people as they retire and all of those things. And these workers have been overextending themselves, doing work that must be done by 2 people, being 1 or by 3 people, without even being paid overtime. So in our view, we think it is achievable. Look, unfortunately, during a strike, services gets interrupted. We can't avoid that. But workers lose rights they do not defend. We are put on the back foot as workers in South Africa. Every day, our government introduces something new to erode, push back on all the gains that we have made, since the apartheid up to this democratic dispensation. So that's why we appeal to our communities to understand what we're dealing with, including the fact that as public servants in the public service, our daily work contributes to the betterment of South African people, especially the working class and the poor.
Yes.
So we are in the frontline service delivery. So the public needs to understand that there has to be a balance between the services we render to them and our conditions of service, because a workforce that is not happy, a workforce that is depleted, compromises the capacity of the state itself to deliver the kind of services our community requires. So hence, it's not a narrow struggle that we pursue. It's a struggle that is also aimed at defending the public service as a whole.
December, just for clarity's sake, how many people or unions are expected to participate? And really just walk us through what's set to happen come Wednesday. I think also there are going to be implications. So if workers who don't arrive at work, what are some of the, what impact will that have on the employment, etc.? Just quickly walk us through those dynamics.
Look, there are no workers who will be dismissed, for instance, for partaking in the action on Wednesday. Because that is within their right, is enshrined in our constitution, in our laws in South Africa. The only thing that South Africa employers can do is to deduct when no work, no pay for that particular day, because that is also provided. We know they always threaten workers with that, but it's not something we don't know. Something that has been there since 1994. So workers will not be deterred by that. So in terms of what permission that has been granted in Cape Town by the city of Cape Town, we're expected to bring a maximum of 5,000 workers, because it's just a demonstration on that day. It's not like it's a total withdrawal of labor. The total withdrawal is going to happen once the 7 days notice I was telling you about comes into effect. Right, so we'll start counting on the 22nd on Wednesday. It's a countdown up to the 7th day, which we'll see the total withdrawal of labor on that particular day.
All right, December, thank you for weighing on that. Sally as well, thank you for your time. We'll have to leave the discussion there. Sally Malema is the General Secretary of NUPSWA, and December Mavuso, Deputy General Secretary for NEHAWU, weighing in on the on Wednesday, we see that unions affiliated to both COSATU and SAFTU are going to embark on a demonstration to highlight the intention to go on strike, an indefinite strike. So again, thank you to them for highlighting what's set to come on Wednesday. So in other news now making headlines for the week ahead, in 2017, we saw South Africa commemorated 100 years. This was since the sinking of the SS Mendi ship. Now, the ship was transporting South African soldiers to France during the First World War when she sank. Most of the 600 troops who perished were black soldiers, and families were not compensated for this tragedy. So ahead of Armed Forces Day, we're going to bring you this package where Aldrin Sampier pays tribute in Son of Africa. Take a look.
Be quiet and calm, my countrymen. What is taking place now is what you came here to do. We are all going to die. Jim Jamangile, do you remember these words? Spoken by Reverend Goba as the English Channel swallowed you and 600 men. The tragic tale reverberates like rattling rifles at war. Despite this, there was no surrender, as many took on your boots.
That was a very unpleasant night to all the inmates of SS Mendi.
Clearly, Black Lives Matter is a century-long campaign. Unarmed, you were part of what's perceived a white man's war. Stunned by your bravery, Mnwabisi, your brother's son, took up arms. But this was a different kind of war, on home soil.
When I joined the National Defense Force, or when I decided to be a soldier, I joined like any other person. Just, I want to defend my country, I want to go and fight for my country.
The battle continued through the years. And soon, under the blue African sky, we would be equal. Jim Jamangile, your sons and daughters from either sides of the battle line stood guard, ushering in the Commander-in-Chief. It's a new political landscape.
And to oppose all that may harm the Republic.
But the murky political waters would take the Republic by storm.
I've taken the decision to resign as President of the Republic.
Despite the resignation of their Commander-in-Chief, your sons and daughters stayed true to the task at hand, protecting our borders and our neighbors, and at times paying the ultimate price.
Soldiers have no right to life. That's our uniqueness. Soldiers have no right to life.
They too gave life from a tree in Mozambique, gave hope to orphans who lost their parents in Nigeria, and built a school for children in the DRC.
We're an instrument, the last line of defense of the RSA. And then, of course, in the Defense Force itself, when everything comes to a halt, the Defense Force comes into the picture. And then we try, in fact, to a limited extent, of course, to build our own inherent capabilities to be able to do everything.
Jim Jamangile, as we remember you and your fallen countrymen, we can't forget that some graves lie unmarked on foreign soil. To you and your descendants who remain faithful to the Republic, we say, salute. Aldrin Sampier, SABC News.
Right. Right, so annually South Africa commemorates Armed Forces Day. This year, SANDF says it plans to go all out when it comes to commemorating the day. But there are some concerns that within the army is not as gloomy as it looks to be. Perhaps for this, we are going to be bringing in military expert Helmut Roma Heitman for more. Helmut, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time here at the SABC.
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry we have to do Stone Age, but I don't have an internet connection at the moment. I think something went wrong during load shedding.
It's obviously not a new phenomenon, so we appreciate you making time. Perhaps we could talk to the significance of the day. Armed Forces Day is very important to commemorate. In your opinion, what is the importance of celebrating such a day for the country at large?
Look, I think possibly part one would be to say it brings to mind that some people do put their head on the block for the country and for their countrymen. We've had to see a particular group on this day when Mendi sank, but a lot of soldiers over a lot of years have risked their lives and some have lost their lives for the country, and it's worth bearing that in mind. The second aspect, I think, is to remind people that actually there is a defence force and what it does, what it can do, and in this present situation, maybe also what its difficulties are. You tend to lose sight of the military in peacetime. You know, who needs it? It's like insurance premium. You only remember it when you have to pay it.
Well, Helmut, on the back of that, I mean, this day, from the outside, it's going to look, rather festive. We're going to see the drills amongst many other processions and activities taking place. But to flip the coin, perhaps we could actually talk to the realities that SANDF is facing currently, the challenges that they're experiencing. We know that there are issues about some of the concerns relating to budget allocation, recruitment, and one has to also question whether they are sufficient, especially as we look at their role on the African continent. How would you weigh in on that?
Look, to take your last question first, at the moment, South Africa's military capability is nowhere nearly what it should be. Even just for a sub-regional role, so just helping protect the SADC and its interests, let alone sub-Saharan Africa or wider. The Navy is far too small, the Air Force is far too small, the Army is too small. The Army, in fact, has got barely enough troops to actually do what it's supposed to be doing. We've got troops in the Congo, we've got troops in Mozambique, we're supposed to be doing the border. And every time anything goes wrong in the country, the government calls on the Defence Force, without taking into account that maybe it's getting a bit thin on the ground. And for that matter, that with the funding, its equipment is also getting exceedingly old. I defy you to find a member of parliament who rides to work in the morning in a car as old as most of the vehicles or aircraft the Defence Force has to use.
So, Helmut, on the back of that, how would you categorize the state of SANDF? Is the army in a position to defend the country? Just looking at the dynamics at the borders, high crimes that have been reported there alone, one has to also question their presence. How would you weigh in on that?
Look, there's no way we could defend against a serious military threat, but there isn't one at the moment, which doesn't mean there won't ever be one, so one does have to keep some level of capability. In terms of lower threats, say the main insurgents are spread in Mozambique and spread south onto our border, could probably handle it, but with some difficulty. There are too few people, there's too little equipment, and the equipment that the Defence Force has, it can't maintain, it doesn't have the money to maintain it properly. So, you find, you'll recall, the Gripen fighters were grounded for over a year. It's going to take probably to end of this year before the pilots are really proficient again. The Royal Alex helicopters are getting very old, and some of them are going to have to be retired. The frigates and submarines, only one of each has been fully refitted since we bought them almost 20 years ago. So they're also in trouble. And the Army has similar problems. I mean, its vehicles, a lot of them date from the mid to late 1970s. So they're not exactly the youngest things. There's nothing much wrong with the people. Sure, any big organisation has got some idiots and some crooks, and so does the Defence Force. But we've got some pretty good people too. And if you look at where they've had to operate in Africa over the past 20 years or so, in Burundi, the DRC, Comoros, Darfur, Cote d'Ivoire, now Mozambique, generally they performed very well. And I've had a senior official of MONUSCO in the Congo say to me that the South African battalion there was the only battalion he'd be prepared to risk going to war with. So they've not done badly. When you look at how they handle internal problems when they arise, pretty well, most of the time the Defence Force rises to the occasion, does a job and does it well. Unfortunately, it's doing it often at the expense of eating the bone and muscle now, because a lot of the fat has been burned off already. So, as I say, nothing much wrong with the people, and certainly not those who've actually been on operations. I mean, pretty much everyone who knows them will agree on that. But there's a limit to how much your people can do if the equipment is getting old and isn't properly maintained. And that costs money. And then there are simple gaps in capability. You know, for maritime patrol, to cover our coastal waters and Marian Island waters, we have currently, I think, only one 1943 vintage Dakota available. It's been refurbished, it's got new engines, but it's got no radar, it's got no electronic systems. It can't really do the job. The ships are far too few, of course, only 4 large ships. The transport, the airlift side, therefore, they only have 6 or 7 medium transport aircraft. So if you want to talk regional, we have no ability to transport people, even with the fringes of SABC, let alone further afield, in reasonable numbers quickly enough. And for that sort of thing, you have to move quickly in force, otherwise just make yourself a target. So therefore, that's very clear. The defence force is certainly aware, and so is the minister. But the country's got other things it wants to spend money on, so those gaps are not going to be closed anytime soon, I suppose.
Well, we'll also see what the impact of the budget speech is going to have on you know, finance allocation amongst that. But unfortunately, we have to leave the conversation there, Helmut. Thank you for your time, for joining us. Helmut Roma-Heitman, military expert, weighing in on the commemoration that's set to take place, Armed Forces Day, happening on the 21st of February 2023. Right, so as we take a look at some other news making headlines, perhaps on the international front, this coming week we're joined by SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena. Very good afternoon to you, Sophie. Thank you for your time. Lots of drama during the AU summit that obviously kicked off this weekend. We saw questions about the Africa's stance in relation to the Israeli position. And I wonder how you'd weigh in on what's happened and how impacted it's going to be going forward.
Well, indeed, yesterday we saw the visuals where the diplomat from Israel was requested to leave the room just before the summit started yesterday. It was not surprising because if you remember very well, on Monday, Minister Naledi Pandor, International Relations Minister in South Africa, hosted her counterpart from Algeria. And both ministers were quite clear that the decision by the AU Commission Chair, Moussa Faki, to admit or to grant Israel observer status, it's something that some of the countries on the continent would not support. And you'd recall that a decision was taken last year to appoint a committee, South Africa was included, that will look at this issue and make a recommendation during this summit. Unfortunately, as you heard from the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Algeria on Monday, that meeting didn't discuss this issue, didn't even have a single meeting. And therefore, this was bound to happen. And therefore, we saw what happened yesterday because some members of the AU are saying you cannot admit Israel as a country that has got rights to observe the African Union as long as some of the areas in Gaza, there's occupation of the Palestinian land. And therefore, that will not be something that they will approve, but rather they will sympathize with Palestine. That is why in most cases you see these meetings of the AU, there's someone representing Palestine at a very high level to present a maybe what can be expected in that particular year. And therefore yesterday, this is what happened.
So on the back of that, have there been any reactions that have come through? What's transpired?
Maybe when we can bring that video so that the viewers can see what we are talking about, where this diplomat was requested to leave office. Yes, there has been a reaction. Many people are saying this was the right move because, you know, on the continent, many countries support Palestine. Others are saying this was not a right move and Israel is supporting the continent, different countries, and also the fact that this issue could have been avoided. They should have discussed this issue, not to embarrass a diplomat. But clearly you can see that's the AU security, and therefore the commissioner, Moussa Faki, I think he was aware of this situation. There's no way the security can ask these diplomats to leave the room when the commissioner wasn't aware. And therefore, yes, an embarrassment, but maybe a statement, or perhaps this has brought to the attention of the international community that as long as you don't resolve the Middle East question, you'll continue to have these embarrassment. And it's time for the international community to be committed to assisting. And they know Benjamin Netanyahu, you know him, he's very right-wing. I can't see this year the international community making headway in trying to bring together Palestine and Israel to the table to agree. You know that many, and even the UN has taken a position that there should be a two-state solution to this problem.
No, absolutely. And, you know, amidst all the drama that transpired, one has to also look at the outcomes and perhaps what this is going to impact the continent and its modus operandi as the AU. How would you weigh in on that very, very quickly?
Well, I think for me what is critical is how to ensure that you bring peace, and security in areas where you have conflicts like the DRC and others. But two, how do you ensure that you are able to build back better? You know, the economy of the continent was affected by COVID-19 and all of a sudden we had this war. So you have these challenges that we have, famine, conflict in Sahel region, conflict in the SADC region in Mozambique, the DRC, very, very tense. They're fighting, raging on the entire Great Lakes region, experiencing instability, and countries in the Great Lakes region now at each other's throat in terms of what to do and how to handle this. Therefore, I think the issue of speaking in one voice, IGAD, in relation to the M23 rebels to lay down arms, and I spoke to them yesterday. They say they are committed to the peace process, but the government of the DRC under Tshisekedi reneged on agreement that was signed in 2013 in Nairobi, Kenya. And therefore, they are blaming the government, saying the government is not serious. You know, Tshisekedi is the president of the DRC, but that election was very, very controversial.
Nigeria elections are coming up. Talks about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, peace and security are all things we're going to be monitoring. We'll have to leave the conversation there. Thank you for your time. SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena weighing in on the international front. On that note, we're also going to leave it there for today for the show. Thank you for tuning in. We're back next weekend. Until then, from myself, Hazel Wilson, and the team, take care. It is goodbye for now.